The winter's breath tore across the northern fjords, leaving a trail of ice and darkness in its wake. It was the year 843, a time when the gods spoke through the howling winds and whispered in the crackle of hearth fires. Olaf Leifson stood at the prow of his longship, the Serpent's Wrath, as it cut through the choppy waters of the North Sea. His men had followed him across treacherous waters for the promise of glory and plunder along the coast of Northumbria, and they had not returned empty-handed. Blood still caked the edges of Olaf's axe as he watched the shoreline of his homeland emerge from the mist. The raid had been successful, silver, furs, and food stores to help his village survive the brutal winter ahead. Yet something weighed heavily upon the chieftain's heart. The monastery had fallen easily, too easily, and the slaughter left him hollow. At 30 winters, Olaf had led many raids, but this one had stirred something uncomfortable in his chest. Land approaches, Chieftain, called Gunnar, his most trusted warrior, breaking Olaf from his thoughts. The gods have blessed our journey. Olaf nodded, his beard crusted with sea salt and his eyes fixed on the snow-covered hills of his homeland. Tell the men to prepare. Winter has not been kind in our absence. The longship slid onto the shore with a groan of timber, and Olaf was the first to leap into the freezing shallows. His boots crunched against the snow-dusted beach as his men followed, dragging their spoils behind them. The village of Ravnfjord lay nestled between towering pines and steep cliffs, smoke rising from longhouses partially buried in snow. As they trudged up the path, something caught Olaf's ear, a sound carried on the wind that didn't belong to the forest. He raised his hand, and his warriors fell silent. There, he muttered, veering from the path toward a snowdrift at the edge of the forest. The sound came again, faint but unmistakable. A child's cry. Olaf plunged his hands into the snow, digging frantically until his fingers brushed against something wrapped in cloth. He pulled the bundle free, brushing away ice and snow to reveal a small face, red from cold but still alive. A babe, no more than a few months old, wrapped in foreign cloth embroidered with patterns unknown to his people. Saxon work, Gunnar said, looking over his shoulder. From the raid. Olaf shook his head. We brought no children from the monastery. He examined the bundle more closely, noticing a small wooden amulet tucked into the swaddling, a Christian cross. The gods have sent us a sign, murmured Thora, the shield maiden who had joined their raid. A child abandoned in the snow on our return. This is Odin's will. Olaf tucked the infant inside his fur cloak, feeling its tiny heart beating against his chest. Or a test, he replied, his voice low as the babe quieted against his warmth. The village welcomed their return with shouts and celebration, but fell silent at the sight of the child in Olaf's arms. His sister Freydis approached, her eyes questioning. A foundling, Olaf explained, unwrapping the child to reveal a girl with wisps of copper hair. Left to die in the snow. Freydis's face softened. Your wife, Sigrid, may she feast in Valhalla, would have seen this as a gift from Frigg herself. 3 winters had passed since fever had taken Sigrid and their unborn child. Olaf had not spoken of taking another wife, though many had offered their daughters to the powerful chieftain. The child is Saxon, warned Egil, the village elder, his rheumy eyes narrowing. Enemy blood. The gods may curse us for bringing her among our own. Olaf felt the girl's fingers wrap around his thumb, surprisingly strong for one so small. If the gods wished her dead, they would have frozen her before we arrived. I will raise her as my own. She will be a daughter of Ravnfjord. And so it was that the Saxon foundling became Mera Olafsdotter, daughter of the chieftain, raised under the midnight sun and the northern lights, with no knowledge of her true origins. 16 summers passed, and Mera grew into a woman of fierce beauty and fiercer spirit. Her copper hair, now flowing past her waist, marked her as different among the fair-haired Norsemen, but none dared question her place. Olaf had raised her as a true daughter of the North, teaching her to hunt, to honor the gods, and to wield a shield in battle. On this day, the summer solstice, Mera stood beside her father as the village prepared for the feast of midsummer. Her blue eyes, unlike the typical Norse grey or brown, scanned the crowd gathering around the great bonfire. You're distracted, Olaf observed, now in his 46th winter, his beard streaked with grey but his arms still strong enough to send warriors half his age to the ground during training. Mera smiled, adjusting the brooch that held her apron dress in place over her linen shift. The traders from the east arrived this morning. They bring news of English ships spotted near our southern waters. Olaf's expression darkened. More missionaries seeking to spread their nailed god. Or more warriors seeking vengeance for our raids, Mera replied. She had grown up on tales of her father's exploits, and though she had yet to join a raid herself, she had proven herself deadly with bow and knife. Either way, Olaf said, they are not welcome unless they come to trade. He looked at his daughter with pride mixed with concern. You have grown too interested in these foreigners and their ways. Mera laughed, the sound bright against the crackling flames. I only seek to understand our enemies, father. Isn't that what you taught me? Know those you fight as well as you know your own blade. Before Olaf could answer, horns sounded from the watchtower. The village quieted as Gunnar approached, now Olaf second in command and bearing a scar across his face from a raid 5 summers past. A ship approaches, he announced. Not one of ours. English make, but flying a trader's pennant. Olaf exchanged glances with Mera. Perhaps your curiosity will be satisfied today. Come, let us greet these visitors and determine if they bring trade or trouble. The English ship anchored in the deep water of the fjord, and a smaller boat brought 5 men ashore. Their leader stepped forward, a tall man with dark hair and watchful eyes. He wore fine clothes in the English fashion but carried himself like a warrior. I am Owen Lockhart, he called out in halting Norse. Merchant from Northumbria. We seek peaceful trade with your people. Olaf assessed the man carefully. I am Olaf Leifson, Chieftain of Ravnfjord. What goods do you offer that we cannot take by raid if we choose? The Englishman smiled thinly. Knowledge. Ironworking techniques your smiths have not mastered. And I buy amber and furs at fair prices, without the cost of blood. Mera stepped forward, her curiosity getting the better of her. You speak our tongue well for an Englishman. Owen's eye shifted to her, widening slightly at her appearance. Something passed across his face, recognition, confusion, quickly masked. I trade with many peoples. A merchant who cannot speak to his customers is a poor merchant indeed. You and your men may join our midsummer feast, Olaf decided, still watching the Englishman closely. But know that you are watched. Any treachery will be your last act in this world. The feast began as the sun hung low in the sky, refusing to set completely in the northern summer. Mead flowed freely, and the smell of roasting meat filled the air. The English traders integrated cautiously, offering small gifts to key members of the village, silver arm rings for Olaf, fine cloth for the women, and iron tools for the craftsmen. Mera found herself seated across from Owen Lockhart as the night deepened. Up close, she noticed the small wooden cross partially hidden beneath his tunic. You worship the White Christ, she observed, keeping her voice low. Owen tensed. Most in my land do now. Does that trouble you? I'm curious about all gods, even foreign ones, Mera replied, taking a sip of mead. My father says your god is weak, having allowed himself to be killed. Yet he rose again, Owen countered. There is strength in sacrifice freely given, is there not? Your own god Odin hung from Yggdrasil for knowledge. Mera smiled, impressed by his knowledge. You know our stories. As I said, I make it my business to understand those I trade with. Owen leaned forward. You are not like the others here. Because I speak with an Englishman without contempt. Because your hair burns like fire in a land of ice, he said softly. Because your eyes are the blue of my homeland summer sky, not the stormy grey of the north. Mera felt an unexpected warmth rise to her cheeks. My mother was from a distant clan, or so my father tells me. Owen looked as though he might say more, but at that moment, Olaf approached, his hand casually resting on the hilt of his sword. Merchant, he said flatly, I hope you find our hospitality adequate. More than adequate, Chieftain, Owen replied, straightening. Your daughter was just explaining some of your customs to me. Olaf's eyes narrowed. Mera has always been curious about the world beyond our shores. Too curious, perhaps. The world is vast, Owen said carefully. Curiosity is a valuable trait in uncertain times. And what makes these times uncertain, Englishman? Olaf asked. Change comes to all shores, Owen replied. The old ways and new faiths clash everywhere. Even your distant neighbors in Francia and beyond embrace new gods and new kings. Olaf laughed without humor. Not here. Here, the old gods still watch over their people. Here, a man's worth is measured by his courage and his honor, not by which god he kneels to. Mera watched the exchange with interest, noting the tension in both men's shoulders despite their courteous words. Later, as the feast wound down and the English traders retired to the guest house prepared for them, she approached her father by the dying embers of the great fire. You don't trust them, she observed. Olaf sighed, looking older in the flickering light. I trust no Englishman. Not since. He trailed off. Not since what, father? He shook his head. It doesn't matter. Old battles, old wounds. He touched her copper hair gently. Go to sleep, daughter. Tomorrow we will see what these traders truly want. But sleep eluded Mera that night. She tossed on her bed of furs, her mind filled with Owen's strange words and the look in his eyes when he first saw her. There was something he wasn't saying, something he knew. And she was determined to discover what it was. The trading began in earnest the next day. The English brought iron tools, silver coins, and fine textiles, exchanging them for amber, walrus ivory, and furs. Owen Lockhart moved through the transactions with practiced ease, but Mera noticed how his eyes followed her whenever she was near. Determined to satisfy her curiosity, she approached him as he examined a bundle of fox furs. The pelts are finest at the beginning of winter, she said. These were trapped when the first snow fell. Owen nodded. Your hunters have skill. In England, such furs would fetch a high price. Have you been to Ravensfjord before? She asked directly. His hand stilled on the fur. No. Why do you ask? You looked at me yesterday as if you knew me. Owen carefully set down the pelt. You remind me of someone I once knew. His voice had grown quiet. Someone lost to me many years ago. Who? Mera pressed. Before he could answer, shouts erupted from the shoreline. A Norse trading vessel was approaching, returning from a journey south. The village stirred with excitement, and Mera reluctantly left Owen to join the welcoming party. The returning ship brought not only goods but news, troubling news that spread quickly through Ravensfjord. Danish settlements along the English coast had been attacked, not by warriors but by mobs led by priests. The Christian faith was spreading with fire and sword, no longer content to convert through words alone. That night, the mood in the great hall was tense. The English traders kept to themselves, aware of the suspicious glances cast their way. Olaf sat brooding at the high table, his fingers drumming against his drinking horn. Mera slipped away from the hall, needing air and solitude to process the day's revelations. She walked to the edge of the village, where the forest met the shore, a place she often came to think. To her surprise, Owen Lockhart was already there, staring out at the midnight sun hovering above the horizon. You shouldn't be here alone, she said, approaching cautiously. He turned, unsurprised by her presence. Neither should you, especially with suspicious foreigners about. Are you dangerous, Owen Lockhart? Not to you, he said softly. Never to you. Mera moved closer, drawn by the certainty in his voice. You know something about me. I saw it in your eyes when we first met. Owen was silent for a long moment. How much has Olaf told you about how he found you? The question sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the cool night air. Found me? You didn't know. It wasn't a question. I suspected as much. What are you saying? Mera demanded, her hand moving instinctively to the knife at her belt. Owen raised his hand slowly. I mean you no harm. But you deserve truth, not the lies you've been raised with. My father doesn't lie, she said fiercely. Olaf Leifson is not your father by blood, Owen replied gently. You were found, not born to him. Ask him, if you doubt me. Mera felt as though the ground had shifted beneath her feet. How would you know such a thing? Because, Owen said, his eyes never leaving hers, you were born in Northumbria, to my sister. You are English, Mera. Christian by birth, though taken before you could be baptized. The world seemed to spin around her. You lie, she whispered, but a part of her recognized truth in his words, explanations for her different appearance, for the way some villagers had always kept a careful distance. 16 winters ago, Owen continued, Norse raiders attacked our monastery at Lindisfarne. My sister had sought shelter there with her newborn daughter after her husband's death. When the raiders left, she was dead, and her child, you, was missing. Everyone assumed you had been killed or had perished in the journey north. Then how did you find me? Mera's voice shook despite her efforts to control it. I've spent years trading along the Norse settlements, following rumors, searching for a child with hair the color of autumn leaves. He reached out as if to touch her, then let his hand fall. When I saw you yesterday, I knew. You have your mother's eyes. Mera backed away. I need to speak with my father. Mera. He raised me, she cut him off. Whatever the truth of my birth, he is my father in all ways that matter. She turned and fled back to the village, her mind in turmoil. The great hall was still filled with revelers, but Olaf was nowhere to be seen. She found him in his private chambers, examining maps by lamplight. Is it true? She demanded without preamble. Olaf looked up, his weathered face showing immediate concern. What troubles you, daughter? Am I your daughter? By blood? The chieftain's face changed, hardening and softening at once. He set down the knife he'd been using as a pointer and sighed deeply. Who told you? The Englishman. Owen. Her voice caught. He says I'm Saxon. That my mother died in a raid. Olaf nodded slowly. I found you in the snow, the winter after a raid on Lindisfarne. I did not know where you came from, only that you were alone and would die without care. His eyes met hers, unflinching. I chose to make you my daughter that day. Why didn't you tell me? At first, you were too young to understand. Later? He shrugged his massive shoulders. Later, it seemed unnecessary. You were my daughter in my heart. What did blood matter? Mera sank onto a bench, her legs suddenly weak. The raid on Lindisfarne. You were there. Olaf's silence was answer enough. Did you kill my mother? The question hung in the air between them, terrible and necessary. I don't know, Olaf admitted finally. There were women at the monastery. Some fought, some didn't. I can't say whose blade might have taken her life. Mera pressed her hands to her face, feeling as though her entire world had shattered around her. I am the child of your enemies. You are my daughter, Olaf said fiercely. Blood is only the beginning of kinship. 16 years of love, of teaching you to hunt and fight, of watching you grow strong, that is what makes you mine. She raised her head, tears streaming down her face. Owen says I was born Christian. And raised to honor Thor and Odin, Olaf countered. The gods you honor are a choice, Mera. As are the people you call family. I need time, she whispered. To think. Olaf nodded, though pain flashed across his features. Take the time you need. But remember this, whatever you decide, you will always have a place by my hearth. You will always be my daughter. Mera fled into the night, her thoughts chaotic. She found herself at the small shrine at the edge of the village, where carved wooden figures of the gods stood watching over Ravnfjord. She knelt before them, seeking guidance, but for the first time in her life, she felt only silence in return. Dawn found Mera still at the shrine, exhausted but clear-eyed. She returned to the village to find it in an uproar. During the night, one of the English traders had been caught attempting to enter the Chieftain's storehouse. Under questioning, he had admitted they were not simple merchants but spies, sent to assess the defenses of Norse settlements along the coast. all except Owen, who had known nothing of the plan. He stood now in the center of the village, bound but with his head held high as Olaf pronounced judgment. For the crime of attempted theft and spying, your men will be executed, the chieftain declared. As for you, Owen Lockhart, you claim ignorance of their plans. I came to find my niece, Owen said firmly. Trade was my purpose, nothing more. My men betrayed me as surely as they betrayed your hospitality. Olaf's gaze shifted to Mera as she approached. And what did you plan to do if you found this niece? To tell her the truth of her birth. To offer her a choice. Owen looked directly at Mera. Not to steal her away, but to let her know she has family across the sea. The village had fallen silent, all eyes moving between Olaf, Owen, and Mera. The truth of her origins was now public knowledge, whispers already spreading through the crowd. Father, Mera said, stepping forward. May I speak? Olaf nodded, his face unreadable. This man is my blood kin, she announced clearly, her voice carrying across the assembly. I believe he speaks truth when he says he knew nothing of his men's treachery. She turned to face the villagers. Many of you have always looked at me as different, as other. Now you know why. I was born Saxon, found in the snow by our chieftain, and raised as a daughter of Ravnfjord. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Mera continued, her voice strengthening. But I stand before you as a shield maiden of the north. My loyalty is to this village, to the man who raised me, to the gods of sea and sky who have watched over me. Blood is only the beginning of kinship, not its measure. She turned back to Olaf. I ask mercy for Owen Lockhart, in recognition of the blood we share. Let him return to his land with a warning, but without bloodshed. Olaf studied her face for a long moment. And what of you? Will you go with him, back to the land of your birth? The question hung in the air like the moment before a storm breaks. Mera felt the weight of every gaze upon her. My home is here, she said finally. But I would know more of my mother, of the family I lost. Perhaps. She hesitated. Perhaps there is a way to honor both bloods that run in my veins. Olaf's weathered face softened. There is wisdom in that. He turned to Owen. Your men's lives are forfeit, but you may return to your land, on one condition. You will serve as a trading contact between Ravnfjord and Northumbria. Regular voyages, fair exchange. No missionaries, no weapons sold to our enemies. Owen bowed his head. Agreed. And Mera? My daughter stays where she chooses, Olaf said firmly. But you may visit with each trading season, to share stories of her mother's people. To be the bridge between her two worlds. The bindings were cut from Owen's wrists. He approached Mera cautiously. Your mother would be proud of the woman you've become, he said quietly. Different from what she might have imagined, but strong. Honorable. Tell me about her, Mera requested. Before you leave. And so, as his men were led to their execution and preparations made for Owen's departure, Mera sat with her uncle and learned of Miriam, the woman who had given her life. A woman of faith but also of fire, who had taught herself to read, who had defied her family to marry for love, who had hidden in a monastery not out of piety but pragmatism when her husband died. You have her spirit, Owen told her. Her unwillingness to be bound by others' expectations. Later, as the English ship prepared to depart, now with only Owen aboard, Mera stood beside Olaf on the shore. I could have lost you today, the chieftain said gruffly. Mera shook her head. No. Learning where I came from doesn't change where I belong. She took his calloused hand in hers. You taught me that we choose our fate, that the Norns may weave the threads but we decide how to wear the cloth. I choose Ravnfjord. I choose you as my father. Olaf's eyes glistened with unspoken emotion. And Owen? He is a thread from another life, one I never knew. Mera watched as the ship began to move away from shore. But perhaps it's a thread worth weaving into my future. There will be talk, Olaf warned. Some will question your loyalty. Then I will prove it to them, Mera said firmly. In battle, if necessary. Olaf smiled, pride evident in his gaze. You won't have to wait long. The troubles in England will not stay there. War is coming, and we must be ready. Then let it come, Mera replied, feeling for the first time completely certain of who she was, not just Norse or Saxon, but both and neither. A woman of her own making. We will face it together. As the midnight sun gleamed on the water, father and daughter stood watching the horizon, where past and future met in an endless circle, like the great serpent Jormungandr encircling the world. The gods watched, the Norns wove, and Mera Olafsdotter, child of two worlds, prepared to write her own saga in the Book of Fate.